at the time in the 30s and the 40s, okay, it was fascism against communism, but they're both the same sides of the same coin, and they're both heavily on the left. So it has never been on the right. But the denotation of fascism is when private corporation colludes with government agencies. Now, typically, it doesn't have to be coerced, although it could be coerced, but it's almost like a symbiotic relationship, and the people are the victims. The people are the products, and so you want to control the product. And what we have here is Elon Musk, and not many people are out there like Elon Musk who actually have the funds. I mean, you have to have the funds first and foremost. The funds, the influence, the status. You have to have all that, the intelligence, the strategy, to a point where you can have control over a major platform, because we don't have competition with these major platforms. We have Section 230, which is to delineate a publisher from platform. And this was bred in 1996 to ensure that internet companies could thrive without being sued to an oblivion, and this was to propagate new technology, new services, new goods, so that people could utilize this into the future. So this was a type of protection. But if you're a publisher, you get immunity, but you cannot operate like maybe I didn't say this correctly. If you're a platform, you get immunity, but you cannot operate like a publisher, which if you're a publisher, you can arbitrarily decide what you want on your platform. Well, let me give an example. If you're Facebook, you're a platform. You allow people on your platform. You cannot arbitrarily kick people off for their political ideology or anything like that. You're effectively being regulated as a public utility. So, man, this gets complicated. But if there's not enough competition, the government comes in and they regulate as a public utility. This is deemed the new standard of living, just like energy, just like electricity, just like telecommunications. And so we use that in modern life. You kind of need that just to survive. Now, if it's like a facial spa, that's not a standard of living. So there are certain categories that are deemed standard of living. You need electricity, you need a phone, you need the internet, you need social media now to connect and even run your businesses in many cases. So the government comes in, they intervene, they say, because we cannot incentivize competition for whatever reason, we're going to come in and we're going to regulate as a public utility. So now you get the full constitutional protections because this private corporation is being run as a public utility. So they're a platform. They cannot just kick people off arbitrarily, and thus they also get immunity from lawsuit. If you're a publisher, like you have a website, and you're writing on the website, and you want to decide who is going to post and what you're going to write and all that kind of stuff, you can arbitrarily kick people off. You can discriminate, using that in a neutral term, but you are liable for lawsuit, because you're controlling the entire situation. So right now what we have is these platforms, there's not many of them, there are a few of them, they're given the immunity of a platform, like the platform term, but they're arbitrating as if they're publishers. And you have the executive branch who's in collusion with these big tech companies, so they're not prosecuting. Prosecution power is derived from the executive branch. You can have adjudication power in the judicial. You have legislature you have making laws, passing laws in the legislature, in Congress, but the act of actually charging and prosecuting, that falls under the executive branch. But if the executive branch is in line with big tech social media companies, then nothing's going to occur. There's not going to be any type of solution for this. This law will not be upheld. It will not be faithfully processed as you would through any other type of charge or like you have breaking of the law. That's what you have here. So nonetheless, Elon Musk, he got Twitter a major platform that people are on. Of course, you had a lot of people who said they don't want free speech, they don't want hate speech, so they're never going to be on the platform, but they're still on the platform because they have to utilize it. You can't just have a platform that is all on the left, and you can't just have a platform that's all on the right. That's not going to work, because if you're all on the right, it's an echo chamber. Maybe there are some differences in opinion and perspective, and you can't have a platform that's all on the left because it's the same type of situation. You have to have a platform that encompasses and allows, and where people want to go to, where it's all people from different perspectives, because then you actually have a platform. Then you actually have something that's, let's say, sustainable as the town square. Now, because it's a town square type of situation, Elon Musk was fighting for, metaphorically, for that free speech opportunity. He was granted that in the sense that, he turned Twitter private and he could effectively do whatever he wants. It's his company. He can do whatever he wants now. I understand it's still under loan. That's the presumption, but it's his company. On paper, he can do what he wants. And of course, people are using Twitter and it's better than ever. You can say that there's hate speech and there's content that's not appropriate. And of course there is that, but that is a cost to free speech. There is a cost of free speech. But that's better than the alternative. If you're not able to go on a platform, see graphic content, pertaining to the war, not just in general, pertaining to the war, see different texts, see different perspectives, and make your own judgment, make your own discernment. That's a right that you have. I mean, it's our First Amendment right. It's not just to freely speak and freely express, but to also be the recipient of expression and speech. If you are blocked from any one of those, because even now on Twitter, this was said by the CEO. What's the girl's name? Linda Yasserino. So she comes from the WEF. There's a whole critique on her, and I've gone ahead and done that maybe a few months back. But she came out and she said, you have freedom of speech on Twitter, but you don't have freedom of reach. Okay, so like I said, there's no free speech absolutionists. Twitter is not 100% free speech. You still have some barriers, and so in this instance, you have the CEO coming out saying, you can freely speak, but there's like a box over you and no one can hear you. Well, part of freedom of speech is not just the ability to freely speak and freely express, but also the ability to be a recipient of that. If you cannot be a recipient of that, you don't truly have free speech. It's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. So anyways, Elon Musk, he's pursuing this. It's going well as far as I can see. It's not perfect. It's not ideal, but it's an alternative in this game where we don't have enough competition, which the government should really come in and incentivize. That would be most preferable, because then you can have businesses actually retain their rights. Like businesses are made out of individuals. Individuals have rights. So you have consumer rights, you have business rights. Those all come from individual rights. And so businesses, just like as an individual, if you don't want to go to a certain store because you don't like a guy because he's black or he's Hindu or whatever the reason is, not condoning it, but whatever your reasoning is, you have the right to discriminate. Businesses still have that same right, but under the Civil Rights Act, which was apparently derived from the 13th Amendment, which you didn't even need to pass the 13th Amendment because we have it in our founding documents that all men are created equal. It's really upon culture to enact that from a societal level. And then the Civil Rights Act is also largely unconstitutional because in this country you cannot be forced to do something. You have a right to discriminate, but there needs to be enough competition so that if a person is discriminated from a business because the business doesn't want to serve whoever that individual is for whatever reason, he has an option to go somewhere else. And more likely than not, if there's enough competition, someone else will serve that individual. So that's more preferable for the government to come in and incentivize competition. However, we have a government right now who actually wants to create oligopolies and monopolies because they collude with big private corporations. So you have big oil, big tobacco, big medical, big pharma, big tech. Like there's a reason why there's a big, and then put whatever moniker you want, because you have oligopolies and monopolies, and that's anti-American. So you had Teddy Roosevelt in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He looked at Standard Oil and he broke it up. He said, this is a trust. You can't have a trust. We're going to break it up. You effectively have a monopoly on oil. And if you look at Standard Oil, if you follow the map, Standard Oil broke up into pretty much like 98%, all of the oil companies we have today, including the ones that sound like the British. There's some British interjection there like BP, Shell, but ultimately they all are a derivative of Standard Oil. And that's just incredible because now you have all of these different companies. They all have, now there's competition in that industry, somewhat, and they can compete with each other. Versus if you don't, now we're off on a totally different tangent. If you don't have competition, you just have an oligopoly or monopoly, they can effectively do whatever they want, not improve their product, not improve their service, have exorbitant high prices, and you as a consumer don't have consumer rights, right? So going back to this, Elon Musk, he's pursuing something good, but the EU is working in tandem with strategic ideologues and the people behind the scenes who want to puppeteer society because they have a certain worldview. They want to implant that worldview onto the average person. Most people are unsuspecting of that worldview, but nonetheless, it's occurring behind the scenes and even overtly right in front of your face because you're not paying attention. Bread and circuses, the old Roman saying, you're distracted, feed into their gluttonous activities, and people will be so distracted, so inundated with, let's say, food or mind-numbing substances, mind-numbing content that they're just not paying attention to the politics behind the scenes. And politics doesn't necessarily mean, hey, look, there's a new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. What it really means is incentives, motives, interests. That's it. It's not necessarily people wearing suit and ties. There's politics in the mob. There's politics within cities. There's politics within the office. They even call it office politics. So there's politics in every aspect of life, and it runs our world. But when you're so distracted, all politics is strategy based off of interests, incentives, and motives. It's an entangled web. Think of a spider web, and if you're not paying attention, you don't know which line is connecting to which and how it affects other lines in the web. So that's extremely important because over time, society degrades. Every society has degraded since the inception of that society. What we care about here in America, we're classifying America as a unicorn because we have individual rights. These individual rights are absolute. That's what it's listed out to be in the Constitution. In our original Bill of Rights, there's 10 of them. I know there are other amendments now. I believe it goes up to 26, 27, but the original